Hello viewers, you are watching QTV, the Gambia's first private TV station, and we are broadcasting from our studios here on Kairaba Avenue. My name is Aliou Cisse, and it's your weekly State of Affairs program with my co-host, Mr. Sidi Cisse. Sidi.
Thank you very much, Aliou, for having me.
Wonderful, thank you very much. This is Mr. Sidi Cisse, my co-host. Well, this week we are looking at the role of the opposition and civil society as far as, holding government accountable is concerned in this country, but also in the second part of this program, we will also try to delve into the address by the President at the UN General Assembly. As you know, world leaders are meeting in New York for the 77th United Nations General Assembly under the theme, A Watershed Moment, Transformative Challenges to Interlocking Challenges. That's the theme for this summit. And like I said, joining us this week, I have Mr. Essa Njai, who is a political scientist and a lecturer at the University of the Gambia. Mr. Njai, welcome to the State of Affairs program.
Thank you for having me.
And also in the studio, we have our very good friend and brother, Mr. Almame Tal, who is the spokesperson of the United Democratic Party. Mr. Tal, welcome to the State of Affairs program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let me start with Essa. Like I said, first part of the program, we'll try to look at the role of the civil society, of course, on the opposition. But in your own understanding, let's start by looking at the state of the civil society in this country. What do you understand as far as the state of the civil society in the country at the moment is concerned?
Well, to start with, let's take a memory lane. Let's go back to, let's do a little bit of history in terms of the role of civil society and, of course, opposition parties in democratization process in Africa. If you look at the post-Cold War era, that was the third wave democratization era in Africa, when multi-party systems or multi-party democracy, began on the continent after, the Cold War ended, and, the United States was proclaimed to be the champion of the Cold War. African governments were given two conditions, and one of these conditions was political conditionality for aid to come. And this political conditionality was that African governments must adopt, multi-party democracy, but also respect fundamental rights and freedoms. And this was the reason why most African countries at the time had to adopt multi-party system in place of one-party system, because we had one-party systems on the continent, in Ghana, in Guinea, in Kenya, in Tanzania, and a lot of other countries. Well, the Gambia was an exception to this because we had multi-party democracy, from independence to 1994, when our politics, took a U-turn, and through the military coup, led by Yahya Jammeh. So, this was the moment when African countries began to move towards multi-party democracy, and in this process, wave of democratization on the continent, as Omar Bongo, former president of Congo, Gabon, will say, the winds from the east were truly shaking the coconut trees. And what we saw was that civil society, was very strong, very vibrant at the time, to ensure that most of these countries, hold multi-party elections. We saw multi-party elections being held in Kenya, being held in what is the name of the country again? Benin. We saw in a lot of other countries in Africa, and of course, like I said at the time, Gambia was having multi-party system until '94. And we had a military coup. In Zambia also was a typical example. The Zambian Congress of Trade Union was very instrumental in ensuring that the country moved towards multi-party democracy. In fact, the Zambian Congress of Trade Union was the one that metamorphosed into the movement for multi-party democracy, MMD, and was able to defeat the long-term ruler of Zambia at the time. Frederick Chiluba defeated Kenneth David Kaunda in the elections that year. So civil society in the Gambia, we know, since the coming of the Yahya Jammeh era in 1994, were dormant, if they were existing, in fact, because of the nature of the system that we had in place, dictatorship, of course. No civil society was allowed. The political space was not that liberalized. As a result, we couldn't have civil society to hold the government to account. But with the change of government in 2016, we saw that the political space was more liberalized and was open. Different political parties began to emerge, and of course, civil society also began to emerge. At some point, showing some level of vibrancy, trying to hold the government to account. Of course, we have challenges because for me, I believe that one major challenge that a lot of civil society organizations have in this country is the understanding of their role. A lot of them think that, well, they have a role to observe elections, to say, okay, elections are free or they are not free, run projects, health sensitizations. But when it comes to holding the government to account, especially when it comes to its actions and lack of actions, I think that is really lacking, in the work of civil society in the Gambia.
And you talk about how, the political space is more liberalized since the change of government in 2016. Let me bring in Alma Metal here, who is the spokesperson of one of the biggest opposition party, that's the United Democratic Party. Mr. Tal, when you look at the role of the opposition in trying to holding the government accountable, are we really up for the task? Is this really happening?
I believe so. I believe the opposition in the Gambia, by and large, has been very effective in engaging productively the Gambia government. What has not happened, however, is the architecture of governance. That has not changed. And because that has not changed, even if you attempt to hold government accountable, it becomes difficult. What I mean by that is that the way laws are made in the Gambia is from the 1997 Constitution, which was designed principally to ensure that no effective mechanisms of accountability are in place. Yes, we have the public finance and public enterprise committees in the National Assembly. Actually, is chaired by a member from the opposition. I believe at the moment, Mr. Honorable Alaji S. Dabo is the chairman. But in terms of the work that is required to hold the budget process to account, the kind of research, the kind of data that is required to ensure that whatever the finance ministry and other departments put before Parliament are adequately scrutinized and every dalasi, every butut is accounted for. I don't think Parliament is designed that way. Parliament sits very briefly in sessions and claim to be doing most of its work in committees. So without transformational changes in the way Parliament is made, because we are talking about a government according to law. So if you want to hold me accountable, it has to be based on a law. Let us look at the productivity of Parliament since they came back. So far, I mean, it's been about 6 months or so, I haven't had any major significant legislation introduced. I'm saying this to establish the context that we are in a transition, but it doesn't look like that. The transition that started in 2016 has been rudely interrupted because we were unable to get a new constitution which would give us a better architecture of governance. Because if you do not have a way of holding the public purse to account, all these developments you see around would tend to look like deals that people, would go around and arrange for them, and then the Parliament will vote in a budget, and that budget would be used to run the affairs of government. So unless and until we have a new settlement as far as our public finance is concerned, how it is managed, how the opposition, how civil society can hold all our institutions accountable, the opposition's ability or performance in that regard would always be, if not misunderstood, at least people will feel like the opposition is not doing much. But I believe there should be positive engagement with the government. People elect parliaments, they elect opposition members of parliament. As if you look at the numbers, it's very clear that the vast majority of Gambians voted for the opposition parties across the board. Yes, the main opposition party is UDP. I don't think there is any controversy around that. But the challenge for us now to be able to work effectively as one government is for the design of government. to change. We need a new kind of government that is not only empowering Gambians. I think one time I was here, that if you walk on Kairaba Avenue, the Gambian economy is not in the hands of Gambians. And this is not a xenophobic statement. But everything we do, whether you want rice or you want a computer desktop or laptop, you have to go to the private sector and buy it. So all of these are things that I believe if we have a good law reform program, a lot of changes could be brought in, not only to bring about accountability and empowerment, but to ensure that every public office is producing value for the society. This is, for us, this is the starting point, and we have been saying this from day one, that we need comprehensive law reforms so that the country can perform as a first-rate country.
Before I bring in CD here, you talk about the issue of positive engagement between the opposition and the government. In most African countries, it is like winner takes all. How is this affecting that dialogue that you will have expected to see between the opposition and the government?
Yeah.
It's more like they cannot say eye to eye, because you have that winner takes all. It's more about you and those around your circle when you win.
Yeah, I agree with that point, that we have a politics where it is a zero-sum game. Like you said, not only winner takes all, even if you have positive ideas or suggestions of engagement. Let's take, for example, the TRRC process. Where are we as a nation? A white paper has been issued. The case of Solo Sandeng, the NIA 9 has been decided. Statements have been issued that certain people have been decommissioned from their work. But if you want to verify this, if you want to actually bring about genuine reconciliation, is it not useful to talk to the political victims of this 22 years of dictatorship? Where is that engagement? I mean, what I have observed, what our party has observed, is that our institutions across the board, and this is what is important here, because government is not only one person. Government is not only the executive. Government is a plethora of institutions across the board. We have an ombudsman office, we have a National Council for Civic Education. But in my humble opinion, in my humble observation, they are kind of dysfunctional. They are dysfunctional because they are not fulfilling their mandates. Most importantly, they are operating, they are doing their services based on taxpayer money. So this kind of dysfunction is what we need. We need a renewal of our processes, of our systems. We were talking before the starting of the program of all the things that are so out of joint. You know, we hear people are collecting basalt in Badibu, some Kiankas are talking that, Badibunkas, when it comes to money, well, I mean, people like to help themselves. But my point, my brother, is this. We need our institutions to be updated. We live in a digital age. We live in the 21st century. We have the access of knowledge at our fingertips. But what is being shown on our national TV and on even private TVs, very few of them have programming that is empowering the citizens. And the citizens, once they are empowered, they can hold anybody, including political parties, including governments, including offices, to account. Because the accountability is not against one person or one political party or one office. It's accountability across the whole value chain of government. Because we have to agree on this, that every development you see here and everywhere in the world is paid for by the people, is paid for by the citizen. Even the aid we are getting is paid for by German taxpayers or American taxpayers. Every day, it is people who are putting their money together. It's not businesses, it's not government. Government and businesses don't have money. They put up shop and people come and patronize them. So it is extremely important that we have a new theory of governance. We have a new formula of governing. The case of Kenya comes to mind. Kenya in 2007, after elections, there was riots, there were killings. The current president and the past president went to The Hague. They were to be tried for genocide and crimes against humanity. Eventually, all of that went away. But it gave them a wake-up call. They came up with a new constitution where the public revenue is distributed by a commission, where there is a formula within their constitution to say that this level of governance, whether it's at the constituency level or at the regional level or at the county level, all of them have a percentage that they are entitled to. Every year when the revenue is collected, it's not for one person or one ministry to determine what goes where. So that way, there was some kind of level playing field across the country, because the Kenyans were saying that since independence, there has been one community monopolizing the resources of the country, and that has caused a lot of tension and a lot of violence. This is not a new thing. South Africa came up with this concept as well. So if we are doing our transition right, it's extremely important that we look at good examples. We make sure that the politics is no longer a zero-sum game. We have seen in our neighborhood here in Senegal, when Abdoulaye Wade was in the opposition, when he was the main opposition, President Abdou Diouf, invited him several times to be part and parcel of the government. This is how you solve problems of governance in Africa these days. We need new models. We need models that work. We need a system that is inclusive.
And talking about that inclusiveness, you come from the biggest political party, no doubt. I mean, are you open to that inclusiveness?
Oh, absolutely. We have said this so many times. I know a lot of people misunderstand this. Yeah. What we are trying to say is that this is one country. Of course, there are factors who are trying to bring division. And those of us who believe that this is one country, of one origin, of one people, we are every day saying that come to the National Unity Party. After all, the UDP was formed out of the necessity to present a united front against dictatorship. It was formed by NCP, PPP, and GPP. This is a fact of history. It's not like a propaganda. And since Yahya Jammeh realized that these people are serious, because he proscribed OJ, he proscribed, of course, Sadauda and the big wigs, Hassan Musa Kamara and the late Sirif Mustafa Adiba, all of them were told that you cannot contest in elections. He did it because he knew if these people contest in any election, he was going to lose. He knew that Gambians are not going to trust their destiny to someone like him. He was untried, he was untested. But these people have had a relationship with the Gambia. Both of them were vice presidents. Sirif Diba was, Hassan Musa Kamara was. So really, as a political party, we have been preaching this message. Unless and until we form a united front for progress, for transformation, for development, this country, we are going to be talking at each other's difficulties or constraints.
Interesting. Let me now bring in my co-host, Sidi Sisa.
Thank you very much. I will start with Mr. Njai. If I go to Mr. Tal. Quickly, you talked earlier about the civil society inactiveness. You went back to history from the PVP right into 94. Always you talked about the multi-party democracy that Gambia we can always be proud of. But again, we've seen during the PVP era, we have political patronage. When there were unions here, but they weren't active at all. So basically, when you looked at the political patronage in those days, have actually, basically there was no muscles as far as the unions or as far as the civil society was concerned. Will you agree with me?
Yeah, I mean, when I talked about the civil society, I was talking broadly in the context of Africa.
Let's narrow it down.
Not specifically in the Gambia. Not specifically in the Gambia.
I want you to narrow it down to Gambia.
Exactly, because I mean, unions at the time were not that vibrant. Just that we were fortunate to have a multi-party democratic system in place at the time, and this really helped. And also, we had a government at the time that really, was committed to ensure that that multi-party system continued, and this was what helped us throughout the PPP era. But coming to the Jammeh era, I mean, still a multi-party system, but we had that within that multi-party system, it was a dominant party system, just like in the Jawara era.
What I want to find out from you, the political patronage,
yes, certainly,
in any way had hampered
Of course.
The muscles of the civil society.
Of civil society.
Yes.
Political patronage really existed during Jawara's time, and otherwise we call it political co-optation. We know it was a problem during the PPP era, and it continued even in the Jammeh era. And of course, even in the Barrow era, it is happening, but in a different style, in a different fashion. We know when Jammeh wanted to patronize people or co-opt them politically, what he will do is to give you a position, and then he silence you, just like he did to the late Sheriff Diba, to the late Wajuara. But coming to the Barrow era, it's a different case. What we are seeing is that
there's a twist when it comes to Jammeh. Not only would he give you position,
he will
but he will traumatize
you at the end of the day.
Wherever in the PPP was basically inducement.
Suddenly.
Yes, so let's distinguish the two. So they may look similar, but they're different.
Yeah.
The method that the PPP did and the method that Jammeh did is completely
The method are different,
yeah,
but at the end of the day, the goal is to co-opt these people into the system, and the goal was to extend the patronage to them. Jawara did that, perfectly well, and everybody will say Jawara was a shrewd politician because he was able to easily co-opt the opposition, and Yahya Jammeh was doing that, even though Jawara at the end will not traumatize you, but Yahya Jammeh will do that. But I think Barrow is also coming in a different fashion. I mean, trying to befriend some of these opposition leaders. At the end of the day, he will only get people or compensate or extend political patronage to people that he thinks really brought him political capital. And that's what we saw even after the 2021 presidential election. All those that endorsed President Barrow, I mean, most of them are not benefiting anything from government, but those that he thought that really, I mean, were able to bring political capital to him to win the 2021 presidential election, were able, compensated, definitely.
Mr. Tal here, you talked about, Ali discussed with you earlier on the role of the opposition. I think we have opposition parties or political parties who are election-oriented, basically. Because political parties, more specific, the opposition are government in waiting. But many a times you see all these parties, they have their muscles and energy and time into electioning. But apart from that, I mean, they don't do much. Oh, they may have a couple of press conferences here and there, that's it. But you hardly see much that they're doing. They don't look at things from a different angle as far as the government is concerned, on issue-based and policy-based.
I agree entirely, and I think some of it is really about vanity of individuals, thinking that 3 months before elections you can campaign nationally and win an election. I mean, that for me is the height of vanity, and I really think you have spoken to the point. The point is that governments in waiting means that nationwide you must have a network, you must have a structure, and you must have a college of leaders who can step in any time to take on the national responsibility of running a country. We are planning our biennial Congress in December. It will be held in Janjanbureh. We've been having this internal reflection about our processes, about the things we need to do. Next year would be local government elections, and in local government we have shown what we can do. We have given the nation an apparative of what a UDP government would really look alike. It would be firstly inclusive, because we have elected the first female mayor in the history of the Gambia in Banjul. We have the first female national president of our political party. So just to come back to your question, we believe that the politics we need in the 21st century must reflect the values and the aspirations of the citizen of this century. Our campaign in 2021, that 5-point agenda, we hope during the course of the life of this parliament to bring in some innovations in terms of legislation. We think that our institutions ultimately are the ones that are going to make sure that development happens in a balanced way. I saw a letter from the IEC calling on political parties to have their congresses for December. That is the latest period. Otherwise, you run the risk of being deregistered. I mean, this is well and good, but what is the record? What has happened in the past? How do we get away from these situations where the law would say one thing and the persons who are in charge of the implementation of the law do not visit anybody in violation of the law with the consequences that are also prescribed by the law? So really, I think to come back to my brother's point about civil society, because some of us have had the opportunity during the Jame days to be very active in civil society with the press union, with Flair, with comrades like Madi Jobate, and all Emmanuel Juve, the current chairman. We've been involved in trying to contribute because this country gave us opportunities. Some of us had scholarships to go and study during the Sadauda days. And some of us were influenced by his democratic vista to look on politics as a public service. Of course, when the coup d'etat happened in 1994, a lot of things were said. He came back a poor man and he retired at his one property. So at the end of the day, what we need to teach our children and this generation is that activism and civil society started very early in this country, and it's a good thing that the Banjul Declaration, which is today 45 years old, was penned by Sadauda. And now everybody, and coming back to pay tribute to civil society, everybody is into planting trees. ST, I see here as a foundation. They are talking about hundreds of thousands of trees. There are young people in Bakau, in Banjul, all over the country. This spirit was introduced by the tolerant and very visionary government of Sadauda.
Quickly here, when you talk about alternative as opposition parties, but we often see opposition parties very narrow-minded, or whether it's what I use, excuse me, to be a bit opportunist. Like, the Gambia is a global village. We know what happens here, affect the rest of the world. What happens around the rest of the world affects us as well. But you could see political parties who are in opposition would actually not have a platform, I've not seen, to really educate citizens about what is happening around the world and affects us. Yeah. When say, for example, a bag of rice is costing $2,000, oh, it's only Gambia, for example. A tin of milk is, jumped to $10, oh, it's only Gambia. We know we live in a global village.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, and I think it's important here, just like I agree with you. Last week I was in the papers where I said that we have election-oriented opposition parties and, of course, project-oriented CSOs in the Gambia. Opposition parties mostly that are election-focused. When it's time for election, they put up candidates. When elections are over, they go back to their political bureaus. It's only few of their people or militants that will be talking. But actually, in holding the government to account, it's not there. I'm glad that he made mention of the necessity to reform our laws, to put in place laws that will hold the government to account. But I think also who brings those laws, who push the government to make sure that those reforms are done. Of course, here comes the role of the opposition to make sure that they push the government, because it is when you look at our parliament today, we have a more balanced parliament in the history of this country. So those parliamentarians, 15 or 20, I'm glad that he made mention that the majority of them are from the opposition side. Where they are from the opposition, they should be able to push these reforms. But what we see sadly in the Gambia, but we have to say this, we see a lot of our parliamentarians being selfish. When this government came in 2016, 2017, what the first thing they did was to push the idea of changing the age limit. Okay, then they changed the law which says that if you're removed from your party as a parliamentarian, you automatically lose your seat. They changed that law as well because it favors them. What we saw was that they passed the bill. This was 2021, I think, when the past parliament was there, when they wanted to allocate $54 million to themselves. We saw they also put an idea of allocating $100,000 for clothing allowance. So do we really have parliamentarians, especially from the opposition side, that are really interested in pushing the agenda or the welfare of the people to ensure that they hold the government to account? With all the scandals happening in this country, we don't see opposition parties holding press conferences, mostly. We don't hear press release from them. We don't even say what is wrong with we had the diaspora, people in the diaspora in the United States, did a protest. against the president. Before the diaspora do that, what is wrong with the opposition even holding peaceful mind, peaceful protest against the government to say the corruption, the rampant and decentralized corruption happening in this country has to end? But we are not seeing that from the opposition. We are not seeing that from the civil society. And what is dangerous about this country, like I said, we have a government that is very much aware that Gambians don't care. We have a citizenry that don't care. I mean, scandals will happen. This government is very used to scandals now. Scandals will happen, 1, 2, 3 days, people talk about it, and that's it. So when you have that type of citizenry and that type of government, especially a government that understands the psyche of the people, then it becomes dangerous. There is no proper accountability. And opposition must realize, like you said, there are governments in waiting, shadow government. When you come into opposition, what I see, like you said, opportunistic opposition politicians in this country, not all of them are, but we see some that are really opportunistic. I give an example. Sometimes you see an opposition figure, somebody will come and say, I want to run for presidency. We've seen that in this 2021, a lot of independent candidates, aspirants. Now, before you come, you must be able to study probably the manifesto or the policies and programs of the current government and realize that, look, this is not fit for purpose. This cannot address the problems of the country. Then I'm coming with an alternative. Opposition is supposed to come with an alternative. And now when you come with an alternative, you should be consistent on that. People must stop telling people that there is not, it's nothing like, we know that there is no permanent enemy or permanent friend in politics, but there's what we call principal politics. People must be consistent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Njai. Well, viewers, you're reminded you're watching QTV State of Affairs. I am Aliou Cisse, here with my co-host, Mr. Sidi Cisse, and our guest this week is Njai, political scientist and lecturer at the University of the Gambia, and Mr. Alma Metal, spokesman of the United Democratic Party. We'll go for a short break, and when we return, discussion continues.
Espas Motors is the largest and most modern auto service in the Gambia. Espas Motors is the only authorized dealer in Chevy, Mercedes-Benz trucks, Mercedes-Benz buses, Kia, Ford, Futon Mini and Midi buses, Futon trucks. At Espas Motors, we have qualified professionals who use modern technology to diagnose and repair all brands of motor vehicles. Espas Motor services include auto sales, auto repairs, vehicle painting, availability of high-quality spare parts, towing services. We are reachable at any time. Call Espas Motors on 352222 353-4444 or locate us on the Bertil Harding Highway. Espas Motors.
Looking for the fastest and easiest way to receive money transfers from abroad? Well, QMoney and RIA just made it happen. Now you can receive international money transfer from RIA directly into your QMoney account with no additional cost. Once you receive an SMS alert about your transfer, walk into any QMoney agent across the country to receive your payment for free or use the money immediately to buy credit, QPower, and other QMoney services. It's fast, safe, and convenient. For more info, call customer care on 133. QMoney, Sinu Calpe. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello viewers, welcome back from that short break. You're watching QTV State of Affairs. I'm Aliou Cisse. Earlier on, you talked about, trying to blame the opposition for not coming out, and address some of the issues that are happening in this country. Like, we've seen the GDC had organized a press conference to raise concern about what is trending, especially the killings and all that thing. But Mr. Tal, why is your party UDP? Like I said, the biggest opposition party has not issued any statement or whatsoever.
Well, we believe that it's important to issue statements, and we have been issuing statements quite often in the past. We have had press conferences quite regularly in the past. What we have now realized is that it's more important to be offering real alternatives. This high inflation we are all living under, these price rises, these natural disasters that have happened, these are not things that could not have been predicted. But just by describing the problem or issuing a statement, I don't know if that is the only way. I'm not going to say that is the best way to address these problems. What we need in this country is genuine transition, genuine reconciliation. We need to come together as a nation. And we have suggested in many places that it's time to have a national dialogue about where this country is going. I mean, I admire and respect his suggestions about protest, but a fully organized, fully evolved political party, occasionally you will be involved in protests. But your best protest is to be within the confines of your program and the program of the government, and offer your alternatives. When Solo Sandeng was killed, we came out and protested. When Donald Trump was elected, the women of America came out on the day of his inauguration to protest. You can do both of them, but you have to choose your timing properly. I believe that the challenges that we are facing are not going to be solved because we are talking at each other. We need a new consensus to move this country away from the dictatorship of the past. Because as long as government is not fit for purpose, and government is not only one institution, or it's not only scandals. I mean, these scandals are there. We expect the police, as part of government, to investigate them. We expect that when they get to the court deals with them. But does the court have the rules and the wherewithal and the tools to deal with these things? Even the Solo Sandeng case, or the NIA9 case, it took 6 years to dispose of a open and shut case. Even a child in school will tell you, oh, this is how this case was going to end. It took 6 years. So it's important to issue press releases. It's important to have protest demonstrations. But that is not principally the best tool for a political party to send its message. We believe that our party leader and the party executive on a regular basis consult on all these issues going out. When the Queen, Her Majesty, passed away, we went there. We are really now considering more positive engagement and a dialogue, because the university professors and the transport union, they made a protest just last week. So in a civil society, or in a country that is based on the rule of law, if we do not have good and just laws, all these protests, all these demonstrations is not going to be able to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tal. Quickly, you talked about the transition. This transition has rudely been disrupted. Earlier on, you championed yourself as the main opposition party, and no one can disagree with that. But Mr. Tal, your hands as a party was all over that transitional program. From 2017, your party was in government.
Yes.
So you are talking about the transitional period being rudely disrupted.
Yes.
I want you to be very clear. What do you mean by that?
Okay.
And two, when you take a walk on the Kairaba Avenue, for example, you'll see a lot of businesses that are in the hands of non-Gambians. You had a staunch UDP supporter member who was a finance minister for 2 years. When you talk about the financial reform that will give you and I, as Gambians, money in our pockets, businesses, to do the business that you are asking for, you guys don't do nothing about it. So who are you to blame here? Are you blaming yourself, or are you now thinking, okay, we could have done it differently?
Mr. Sise, I'm not in the blame game.
No, I'm not saying blame.
No,
yes.
that's what I'm saying. If you listen to yourself, you say 2 years we were in government. I mean, I appreciate maybe some people expected miracles, but where did we find the Gambia? In 2017 to 2019, when our leaders were out of government, we found government at Brooks. Brass tacks, government was illiquid. It was bankrupt. This is where the finance minister and the foreign minister, firstly, took us back to the Commonwealth. Secondly, there was a global conference for the development of the Gambia held in Brussels. Thirdly, a constitution law was made. The CRC commission was established. Fourthly, the TRRC commission was also established. So within 2 years, with all the chaos and the aftermath of dictatorship, to have been able to participate in these processes and also to stabilize the Gambian economy, to reduce lending rates, to reduce treasury bill rates. These are profound and transformational steps that were taken. Since then, we were trying to get a new constitution. What happened to that? Since then, we are trying to bring about genuine reconciliation. This is what I meant when I started my discussion, that without the laws, without comprehensive transformation of the architecture of governance, you are not going to be able to make
we
progress.
have seen certain amendments that were done in the 1997 Constitution that your political party pioneered. You know, you telling me here right now, Gambians are actually not running our business.
And I think the transition being, like you said, rudely interrupted, one of the interruptions, major interruptions we can say, was the president reneging on his promise to serve for 3 years, going for 5 years. And of course, I would want, probably if you can throw some light on this. I mean, your party leader was in the forefront to say, the president should go for 5 years. Anybody who wanted to force the president to resign after 3 years, he'll probably take a legal action against you. But later on, we saw the party taking an official position to say the president should go for 3 years, respect the 3-year agreement. While they tried to take an excuse to say this was our party leader's individual position as a constitutional lawyer, but this is the party's position. So that interruption, major interruption of the president, instead of serving 3 years, to make sure that all these reforms are done, the civil service reform, at least they're initiated, the security sector reform, the CRC, and all these things should have been done, at least the foundation should have been laid in that 3 years. If your party or the party leader, Dabo, that President Barrow listened to so much at the time, could tell the president that, look, we need to leave a legacy here. Let's serve for these 3 years. Respect that agreement. We know that there is a constitutional provision which calls for 5 years, but also you have the opportunity or you have the choice to resign after 3 years. If that had been done, probably we wouldn't have been in this mess of, rampant and decentralized corruption, because Barrow is used to power now. We wouldn't have been in this mess of talking about all the reforms that, were rudely interrupted. The major interruption was the president failing to respect the 3-year agreement. And of course, your party was there. What did you do to make sure that the president respected that agreement?
I think
that was a major
I
failure.
have to jump in here, Mr. Njai. Like you said, this government is the scandals, the corruption are just becoming unbearable. You will agree with me, it's no more a coalition government now. This Barrow's own government. So I don't think what happened in the past, as far as the 3 years or 5 years is concerned, has any bearing on what is happening now.
No. But what we are saying,
Ali,
we are trying to do one thing.
It's fundamental, but we also have
we are trying to do one thing. We are trying to do one thing. Just allow me. We are trying to do one thing.
Yeah.
Accountability matters here.
Exactly.
The scandals that are happening today, these things started way back in 2017. The vehicle allocation, 53 vehicles or so to National Assembly members, people talked about it here. But there were some that were saying that, no, people want to give donations, they don't want their names to be disclosed. Look, that is not how you run a country. This is about transparency and accountability. Do you understand my point? The UN delegation, the people are saying today the president went with 47 people. 2017, he went with more than 50 delegates in 2017. So this is about accountability. It's not about, what happened in the past. Of course, what happened in the past must have significant bearing on the present. Because the president, when he came to power 2017, everybody was like, Barrow was like, okay, I don't have experience. I'm guided by the people that are beside me. So if the president is used to power today because of the scandals and all that, it's because the beginning, the foundation was not that strong. So we can't entirely shift the blame to say it's just present and without holding the government to account what happened in 2017, in 2018, in 2019.
So basically you are blaming what happened in the past, what is happening now, even though those who were there are no more in the government.
They have a link clearly.
No, I think the professor is entitled to his opinion.
Yeah.
some of us thought that the way the coalition was stitched together could have been done differently or better. In any case, that is all in the past, because the requirements that were put in the coalition agreement itself, some of us have questioned even before all of this, from day one. But the point he made about our party, let us be very clear. You can be a Gambian and hold a certain view and still be the leader of a party or be a member of a party. We are not all of the same view in the United Democratic Party. I can say that here on television. The important thing, however, is what my brother is saying just now. Accountability is not time-barred. The principle of accountability and transparency in the government processes is an eternal quest. And let us be clear, if our party leader had a position, personal position, and we come out as a political party and say this is our party leader's personal position, this is not the party's position. I think that is good for
was that said at the time when he was saying this 3 years and 5 years?
No,
he did
no.
not.
When we came out to say, let me be very clear.
I think let's, because we're running out of time, so, and we have a lot to discuss. Let's just wrap up this. Well, these 3 years, 5 years is something that
It's not about 3 years. We just
exactly,
want to make facts.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
And let's just move on to something else, please.
So you are talking about the 3 years, the 5 years. You said
I'm not talking about that.
Okay.
He raised it. Explaining
Yes.
that in good faith, our party leader had a position, and I think that position is still his. That constitutionally he was.
My issue is, did he make that clear at the time that this was his
He
view?
is not required to make anything
that's clear.
All right,
anytime.
Mr. Let me come to you now. I mean, we talk about the role of the civil society. I mean, most of them get their funding from external donors. Do this in any way dictate their agenda? Well, because they have been blamed for only criticizing the government. They only blame the government for the wrong thing, and you hardly see them come out to praise the government and say, you're wonderful, you're doing a great job.
Ali, you see, there is one thing in this country which is really very sad. For me, it is, I don't praise people or thank people for doing their job. The government is paid for providing service to the people. I wouldn't thank any government for doing your job because we are paying you from the taxpayers' money. Okay? And people have this notion to say that, why not you blame opposition? Why are you only blaming the government? I'm not paying my tax to the UDP or the GMC or the GDC or PDIS. I am paying my tax to the government. I hold the government to account. And if the CSO are trying to hold the government to account, I mean, that shouldn't be a problem. That is required in a democratic setting. It's only the government that we can hold account. We hold opposition to account when they fail to act. Like we are doing, we're trying to say that the opposition is not acting. The government is not, just like what one of these philosophers will say, who will guard the guardian? The opposition is supposed to hold the government to account, but who is also holding the opposition to account when they fail to hold the government to account? And that is the role of citizens here, even civil society as well. If the civil society is supposed to hold the government to account and they are failing to do that, we the citizens will also hold the civil society to account for failing to hold the government to account. So civil society and opposition, especially civil society, holding government to account. Myself, I've been a victim of that. A lot of time when I talk about this government, people will say, why are you always talking about this government? My friend, if I don't hold this government to account, who will I hold government to account to? Who will I hold account to? I mean, it's this government that I'm paying my tax to. And our democracy, being a fragile one, moving towards consolidation. Consolidating democracy takes a lot of time. It takes a decade, 20 years, because it has to survive long. It has to also resist reverting to autocracy, like some scholars will say, that majority of countries in Africa that transition to democracy always revert to autocracy. That is what we call democratic backsliding, because there is the absence of democratic accountability, because we have the norm of big man rule. And this is clearly what is happening in this country, that when you want to hold government to account, people will say, no, you are blaming the government too much. Yeah. We must hold the government to account. The government must feel pressured. That is when they will work effectively. But when they feel that there is no pressure coming on them, then there's a problem.
Yeah. So when you come about this, I call it the flip-flopping, and I want Alumami to help me here. Is it because people don't feel belonging to political parties? A lot of people can just go out there wear the NPP T-shirt. They're just there because they have brought Almami's NPP and they brought T-shirts for them.
They have no idea.
They have no ideas.
I mean,
so is the question of belonging to a political party and valuing that political party, Do we have it in this country, for both of you guys?
It's really lacking. You see, in political behavior, there is what we call party identification model when it comes to voting. Some people may vote for a particular political party or candidate because their parents have been long-term supporters of that party. But this is really fading away in the Gambia. What we now have is what we call the sociological model of voting. A lot of people align themselves to political parties based on their social whatever, maybe based on ethnicity, or even based on religion. Sometimes people do that.
Probably looks.
Probably looks. Probably, or because, you know, she's a woman or she's a male, because we also have that, you know, talk now in the Gambia here. A lot of people will say, we need women in position. Therefore, all women will tend to support that there's a female candidate. Or some will support the male candidate because the opponent is just a female. So we don't have that. But what we have is that people flip-flopping is because they don't even have an idea of the party that they are joining. I mean,
in circumstances where political parties actually do not have membership or selling membership cards.
Certainly, but I think also political parties do fail to effectively communicate their policies and programs to the electorates, to the people. And this really contributes in why people don't necessarily, I mean, belong to political parties because they believe in their views, because they believe in their ideologies or their philosophy.
It's interesting. Let me just come in. We're running out of time. Let's just briefly.
Mr. Tal want to pay
yeah, but Mr. Tal, just briefly, I mean, I know you've been following what is happening at the UN. Like I said earlier on, I mean, world leaders met in New York for the UN General Assembly. You must have listened to or watched the address by the president where he touched on different issues, the Russia-Ukraine war, I mean, the Rohingya Muslim case, I mean, the Security Council, Africa's not having a permanent representative, among other things. I mean, what's your take on the statement made by the president?
I think it was an appropriate statement to make on the floor of the UN General Assembly. But I think a more fundamental question that we should be asking, what are the foreign policy objectives of the Gambia? Currently, it is the biggest spending item, is the biggest ticket item of our national budget. What is our foreign policy supposed to achieve for the Gambians? Not only its democratization, but to ensure that we have price stability, to ensure that we have high quality standards of living. For me, that is the most important thing. But to come back to this point about political identification or political party or partisanship, I think is a very misleading approach to development. Misleading because unless and until we have a consensus on what is government for, what is the theory of government that our different political parties espouse, or our citizens expect. What do we expect from our government? What are the objectives of this government in terms of infant mortality, in terms of housing, in terms of all the things that make life worth living? So you don't join a political party just on the whims of my brother is there, or my father used to be in this party, or is led by a woman, or I mean, it is a combination of factors that I believe should inform our politics. And the future of really any politics now, especially progressive politics, is performance. This accountability we are talking about is really about what is the government for? What is it supposed to do for us? Does it have to have these large delegations to New York? Or do we need a Russian embassy for the Gambia? What is the use of that? And how do we make sure that in West Africa, where you have democratic recessions in Guinea, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, how do we position our own foreign policy to be able to respond to that? Because if tomorrow there is chaos in West Africa, we are not going to be spared. So really, I think the discussion about our politics is about renewal, about positioning, and having a theoretical framework that people can identify with, people can feel like, yes, this is the new kind of politics that we need to
Mr. Yai, just in 30 seconds, I mean, your take on the statement.
Well, he said a lot of things,
exactly.
Especially on,
China,
foreign policy,
Taiwan. I mean.
China, the issue of China, promoting the one China policy, like he said, but also, and I think that's very clear when it comes to Gambia's foreign policy. It shows that we are choosing infrastructural diplomacy over checkbook diplomacy that Taiwan used to provide. I mean, also he talked about the Western Sahara, the El Sahrawi Republic. I mean, we know that certainly the AU, and that is what I find so puzzling. I mean, the AU recognize, the Western Sahara. Even at the level of the UN, there are 45 countries that recognize Western Sahara, but that is out of the 193. But the president clearly saying that Morocco has sovereign right over Western Sahara is something that I could not comprehend, because looking at it in the context of Africa, Gambia being from Africa, member of the African Union, and African Union recognizing this country or territory, even having a seat at the Pan-African Parliament, and the Gambia is coming otherwise. I'm just interested in knowing what exactly is the Gambia benefiting in taking that specific position on Western Sahara. But also there are a lot of other issues that he mentioned, climate change especially, and then people are saying the Gambia is doing well, faring well in that discourse, trying to meet the target of the Paris Climate Agreement, and also the COP27 that we'll participate in. But I hope that the discussions at the General Assembly will, be of benefit to the Gambia and, of course, Africa in general, especially when it comes to the area of peace and security on the continent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Esanjai, a political scientist and a lecturer at the University of the Gambia, and Mr. Almame Tal, spokesman of the United Democratic Party. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the State of Affairs program.
Welcome. Thank you.
And to my co-host, Sidi.
Thank you very much. And I see you after 4 weeks.
It's always a pleasure to have him around. Well, viewers, with that, we end this week's program. Do join the repeat on Sunday at 10 a.m. But this program, like I said, is also on YouTube and, of course, Facebook at QTV Gambia. On behalf of the production team and the entire management of QTV, we thank you so much for watching, and bye-bye.